I actually got emails from Texas and New Mexico as well, where they are also seeing larger number of die-offs.
Since the beginning of September, dead birds have been found.
Really strange, literally birds dropping out of the sky.
Now, conservationists are sounding the alarm after thousands of dead seals have washed ashore on the coast of Namibia. They estimate more than 10,000 have died in recent weeks. The vast majority of them, say Ocean Conservation Namibia, are premature pups. The exact reason for the die-off at the seal colony at Pelican Point isn't fully clear.
Just the colony that we're dealing with, we're estimating probably in excess of 7,000 dead pups alone, and these are the premature pups, the tiny little aborted fetuses, if you wish. They and that's not counting the adults, the adult females, and other pups lying dead on the beaches too.
And what's the likely cause thought to be?
Well, in history, I mean, this has played out a few times before, and it's normally been chalked down to food availability. It is the most likely cause right now because the animals are very emaciated, they're very thin, lying on the beaches, obviously very malnourished. And
you have suggested that this has happened in the past.
It has. We had a major die-off in 1994. We lost about a third of the entire seal population, which at that stage was more or less the same as it is now, at about 1.3 million Cape fur seals in Namibia. If the fish are too far away offshore, they just don't have a means to get their fill and come back and nurse their pups. So they abort their fetuses basically in an attempt to save themselves.
And can anything be done by humankind to help them?
It's difficult on such a big scale. I mean, if you had a couple of isolated individuals, you could set up rehabilitation centers and try and feed them. But then again, it also the other big factor is that we can't say for certain that it is starvation. There could be toxins involved, there could be sickness, disease, and until we have a clearer picture of what the potential threats are, it's very difficult.
Almost every morning, Mohamed Ghazi takes his boat out to fish, but these days there's nothing to catch, and the serene surface of the water belies the toxic danger that lurks beneath. Thousands of dead fish washed up in this canal at the beginning of this month. 2 weeks on, remnants of what Mohamed says was an unprecedented environmental disaster.
2 months ago in late August, people in New Mexico noticed hundreds of migratory birds that have fallen dead right out of the sky. Within a few weeks, the numbers had expanded to thousands of birds across other states, including Colorado, Arizona, Texas, and Nebraska. Scientists have been struggling for an explanation as they look to protect birds from other threats.
Birds have been falling out of the sky and dying. We're talking thousands of them in the past few months.
A migration this year marked by a massive die-off across several western states. New Mexico was hard hit, as University of New Mexico PhD student Jenna McCullough and fellow student Nick Vencegara discovered.
It was somber, and we were picking up birds very quietly in our own respective bags, and generally the only things we were saying were just incredulous at how many birds were there.
Experts like Allison, who heads Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah's National Audubon Society, say the numbers could be in the hundreds of thousands.
And it was certainly something went wrong this year.
This is a very strange event.
Punjabi co-authored a study detailing a 30% decline of American birds in the last 5 decades due to things like habitat loss. From unprecedented forest fires across the West may also be a factor.
Hyderabad is drowning. The rain has been relentless in the South Indian city, and it's now claimed lives. In one deadly incident, floodwaters pushed a wall onto a house, which collapsed on impact. Other victims were swept away in raging currents.
Give us an idea of the scale of the flooding. We've seen the pictures, and yet Vietnam suffers monsoons every year. How is this different and why?
The scale of devastation is overwhelming. Days of heavy rain, floods, and mudslides in central Vietnam have swept away entire communities. Thousands have lost their homes.
These are considered to be one of the most worst and most affected floods and storm ever in many decades in Vietnam, and affecting life of millions of people.
Catastrophic scenes also in Cambodia. Deadly flash floods have hit the west of the country, prompting the evacuation of some 2,500 people. The military and police have been deployed to assist with the massive operation and hand out much-needed food to isolated communities. And this is the scene in neighboring Vietnam, where flooding has claimed the most casualties in the last week. Up to 1 million people have been impacted by the floods, some 200,000 homes are underwater, and there are fears the death toll could rise.
And the government warns things could get worse as Tropical Storm Sodell approaches. And there's already widespread flooding in the Philippines. Back in Vietnam, rescue teams are preparing for the worst, for what's already being described as the worst floods there in decades.
Critical danger in the west. Overnight, a new wildfire erupting in Colorado as more than 30 infernos burn across the west right now. Parts of Newport Beach are flooded tonight.
But nature found a way to remind us. In the Midwest, punishing 100-mile-an-hour winds. In the Southwest, a brutal succession of floods and droughts. On the coasts,
Delta is bearing down on the Louisiana Gulf Coast.
A freakish number of devastating hurricanes. And in our western states,
the combination of the high heat and dry brush makes for explosive fires.
Historic mega fires that sent a plume of ash and smoke all the way to the East Coast. More than 4 million acres have burned in California alone.
Now to the evacuations tonight. The wildfire emergency in the west. Red flag warnings across 6 states tonight. One fire in Colorado exploding in size overnight.
The 2 largest wildfires in that state's history, burning just 10 miles apart, and weather conditions this weekend are threatening to make things worse.
They have to go slow. Like these firefighters, flanked by flames as they drive to safety.
You are a hero, my hero.
Tonight, the second largest wildfire in Colorado history could become the most massive the state has ever seen. It's already burned an area larger than the city of Chicago, and it might merge with an even bigger fire just a few miles away.
Locked in a desperate scramble to save lives while struggling to protect their own.
You need to get moving now. The fire's coming over you.
The so-called East Troublesome Fire exploding, at times erupting at a rate of 6,000 acres an hour. That's nearly 80 football fields per minute.
High winds and dry conditions creating a perfect storm.
You can see behind me here, the fire is in the trees. The firefighters call this crowning. And when that happens in these conditions, the fire is virtually unstoppable.
I've never seen anything like what we experienced 2 nights ago.
Oh my God.
Forcing the evacuations of thousands, fast becoming the second largest fire in Colorado history, now at nearly 190,000 acres, proving deadly.
Under a dark orange midday sky, they started evacuating the town of Estes Park. Less than 12 miles away, the Cameron Peak Fire also burning. It's the largest in state history.
Go! Go!
The Calwood Fire also forcing families to make dramatic escapes. 7 fires now scorching the state, burning more than 375,000 acres.
A wildfire crisis unlike anything residents in the Rocky Mountain state have ever seen.
Never in the American West has so much burned so quickly. Bone-dry humidity and powerful winds. From Washington State to Southern California, entire communities were wiped out.
In the last 20 years, we've experienced twice the number of weather disasters as we did in the previous 20 years.
Smoke from the dozens of major wildfires mushroomed into thick blankets of clouds so vast they could be seen. It's hard to fathom that the worst may be yet to come.
A city in chaos. Across Lagos, buildings have been torched and sporadic clashes have erupted. This is what sparked the outcry. Soldiers shooting unarmed protesters in the country's largest city.
They are shooting at us! They are shooting!
Nigeria has been a dictatorship for almost half of its life as an independent nation. Many of its citizens worry Tuesday's events echo the dark days of military rule, and they're determined to make sure that doesn't happen.
Chile is a country used to earthquakes, but few people expected the shake-up that we've seen this past year. In just 12 months, Chile went from being an oasis of stability, as its president described it, to a country wanting to rewrite the rules. It all started when Santiago hiked its metro ticket prices by just 4 cents. It represented the tipping point, unleashing anger and resentment among millions struggling to make ends meet in a country that on the surface looked like it was succeeding. The demonstrations were largely peaceful, but clashes with protesters and heavy-handed responses by the authorities have marked this past year too. After a pause in protesting because of COVID-19, people have returned to the streets. Peaceful protests like this, and more troubling ones like this. Tension is high in Chile, and so are expectations.
In Beirut, demonstrations have taken place to commemorate the first anniversary of a mass protest movement demanding political reform in Lebanon.
1 year since the protests began in Lebanon. 1 year of rising and fading hopes. People came from different backgrounds and sects, commemorating a pivotal moment in Lebanon's modern history. A moment when the Lebanese people pushed for change, but were faced with devastating economic, health and security challenges. As they continue their march, they raise their voice with anger. Anger of a corrupt and impotent government who not only made the country poorer, but failed to protect lives.